So this is going to be my bi-weekly synthesis assignment, the final one for this class. So to start off, the first reading called Cultures and Selves, A Cycle of Mutual Constitution, um, explains that the self and everything in the self is made up of different factors. So there's like societal factors and ideas, institutions and products, so that could be like language and the media. Then there's the things that occur in our daily lives, which is like routines, the people we interact with, the school we go to, where we work at, and then at the center of ourselves is ourself, exactly. Um, and then this article also talks about how culture is not a stable set of beliefs or values that like resides inside of people. It's more like in the world. Culture is like patterns of ideas and different practices, physical things. But this article, I think like one of the limitations or kind of explained factors in this was that with research on culture and on the self, a lot of it is still coming from a middle class Northern American kind of background of people. So that these people are reporting like really high feelings of happiness, of freedom, right, of choice and achievement, but it's not really reflecting the other cultures of the world and their tendencies and their selves. So more research needs to be done in that aspect. So this next reading, which is called Towards a Cultural Psychology, Meaning and Social Practice as Key Elements, this reading kind of explains how culture affects and influences our mind. Basically how culture is really just this product, right, of our daily activities and our daily lives. And the individual person has conscious intentions about what they're doing, what their actions are, how they view their culture and the surrounding culture. But culture is kind of this, they explain it as like a relationship with the individual and the mental phenomena outside of our heads. So there's like this really strong drive towards culture being defined as what we do on a daily basis, which really does make sense. So the next reading I really liked. It's called Identity as Burden or Benefit, Youth Historical Narrative and the Legacy of Political Conflict. So this researcher focused on narrative collectives of Palestinian youth, and he's seeking to answer the question, is identity a burden that carries this responsibility, such as conflict and violence, or is it a benefit which carries sources of resilience and strength, freedom from oppression, especially looking at groups of low status? So he kind of views youth as this important period of development and how the youth identifies has like different social implications. So it can be really negative in ways that it can encourage like support of violent political groups. They use the example of a large group of youth using suicide bombing in Lebanon. But the benefit of this is that it creates like a real resilience in these low status groups to encourage, self-esteem, especially when trauma and violence is like all around them, and that's like the environment that they grow up in. So once again, is identity this burden, which is like really conflicting and difficult, or is it kind of this benefit which like makes you really strong and you're fighting for your life, fighting for your rights and what you believe in? So the second to last article is called Unseen Disadvantage: How American Universities Focus on Independence Undermines the Academic Performance of First-Generation College Students. I thought this was really, really interesting, especially being in college myself, obviously, all of us. So basically talking about how first-generation college students seem to really struggle in their academia than those who have parents who have gone to college. And the article, the reading puts emphasis on these reasons. the two reasons are that universities focus really heavily on independence, and the motives for first gen college students are more interdependent. So they need more help, and this is why lower grades can occur. So, this is just another study that shows that it can be really difficult to create your own academic and personal success when you need extra help, or when your first set of needs aren't being fulfilled. Um, One thing that really comes to my mind is like the ability for middle to upper class students to receive financial support from their family members, so they might not even have to work in college, but they have more time to focus on school, especially their studying and social activities too. But then other kids have to work a lot harder, so they're missing out on more, and they're also, having to pick up the parts that they're not being handed. Some of them might work one or two jobs, and even working 30 to 40 hours a week on top of schoolwork seems nearly impossible, but they have to do it to pay for their school. And I think college really tries to make it easy, but in reality, if you don't have that extra help, which a decent amount of people do, it's really, really hard to get by. And many students, though they try to be independent, aren't getting a lot of help from universities. So there's this huge gap. So we have this comforting experience for continuing generation students, but it's uncomfortable for middle class or working Americans, which becomes difficult and in turn makes them perform poorly. And then the last reading, called Culture, Power, and Experience Toward a Person-Centered Cultural Psychology. This reading, I try to do my best interpreting everything. It kind of tripped me up a little bit, but what I gathered from this was that the question the author was kind of trying to seek is culture existing and discoverable, or is it created through this system? And the article talks a lot about essentialism, which can be seen per race and nationality that make up someone's identity. Even geographical locations like East versus West. For some reason, we believe that these geographical locations are culturally different, but there's not really a boundary or a reason. So we just have these different traits for people in the East and the West. And that's the same thing with stereotyping culture, and that this can have a lot of negative implications, because you're holding people accountable to a standard of their culture. So this article kind of is trying to find what the answer is. What is culture, and what people make up culture? And that's what I gathered from that. And that is the last reading. So I also wanted to add a quick note about the documentary that we watched this week called The American Factory, and I really liked it. I thought it was really, really interesting. Crazy though, because the part that I was so shocked at, basically talking about how the plant in America wasn't doing that well because the workers were not as effective, and something with the quality of the glass. But then when the workers go over to China, they talk to some of the workers, and the workers explain to them how they work literally all week. They have 1 or 2 days a month off of work. They don't get breaks. The one guy said he eats Twinkies for lunch on his break. He doesn't see his family, and no wonder their production in China is so high, because these workers are insanely overworked and just put up with it. And it's crazy to me. And the system there is so different, and the obedience from these workers in this factory is crazy. And so I just thought it was really eye-opening. It's interesting to learn about kind of how that economy works in that way, in that industry, and what happened with the General Motor plant and all the jobs. And so I really enjoyed that documentary. And then I think this is it for this week. And I guess for the synthesis assignments, I really, really enjoyed doing these. I thought it was really interesting every week. I think all of the readings were really, really, really informative, and I really learned a lot of things. So I'm very grateful, and I'm looking forward to wrapping up this semester. So thank you.